Hey, Algebra 1, we started talking a little bit about slope today, using the formula to figure out what the rate of change is between two given points or potentially from a graph. And so I just wanted to remind us of a few things that we talked about in class that are real important when we talk about slope. First of all, slope needs to be in simplest form, often a fraction that's been simplified. You could have a positive slope, you could have a negative slope, you could have zero slope, or you can have an undefined slope. And when we use the formula here in a moment, we want to really key in on where zero is, because if you have zero in the top, 0 divided by 7 would be 0. But if you try to take 7 and divide by 0, that's just not possible in math. We talked about several situations that would kind of model that in class today. And so that word, undefined, kind of refers to this as something that's not possible. And I'll just throw out one of the cases. 0 out of 7 people like mayonnaise. That means nobody likes mayonnaise out of 7 people. But if you flip the order of that and say, well, 7 out of 0 people like mayonnaise, well, that doesn't really make sense, because how can you have 7 out of 0? So that's why anytime you have a calculator and you try to divide by 0, you're going to get some type of error message. Basically, it's an undefined value because it's infinity. Anyway, so we talked about how to calculate rise over run, the idea that you can count on a graph how far one point shifts, how the graph is angled from one point to the next. So this one was rising 7 and running 4, so that's your positive 7 force. Or for example, maybe in this second one, from the left point to the right point, you went down 3 and over 9. And so just to kind of key in on that situation, we need to simplify fractions such as that. So negative 3 over 9 is really negative 1 over 3. So we had a positive slope, we had a negative slope. Here's a case where your horizontal line is representing a 0 slope. There's a constant rate of change there of 0. And if you had a vertical line, well, again, that slope would be undefined. So I think we had a few in class I asked you to try. I think I asked you to try 9 through 12, just trying to make sure that you have the signs correct. Negative 3/4, negative 5, both 9 and 10 are both negative slopes. Number 12 has a positive 2 over 3 feel to it. And then again, number 11, it's a word, undefined. So we talked about the slope formula today. And when you're given 2 points, it's real important with slope to understand what they mean by x1 and y1 and x2 and y2 and all that. So let's just make up some points real quick, and let's show what we're talking about. So any point is made up of x and y. And so for this one, we have x is the 3 and y is the 4. But really, we have 2 points, and so we can't just call it x. We have to somehow denote the difference between the first x and the second x, and that's why we have what we call subscripts. These subscript numbers kind of tell us which point we're talking about. So you have your first point, and you have your second point. And for us to do y2 minus y1, we need to lock in on 8 minus 4. And that, if you do real quick, 8 minus 4 would be 4. And the next thing, sorry, I've got some typos. Let's try that again. 8 minus 4 would be 4. And then I'm going to add a line for my divider. That's fine right there. And then for the second part, if you're talking about y2 minus y, or x2 minus x1, that would be the second x value minus the first one. So 7 minus 3 equals 4 again. And so basically this slope comes out to be 4 divided by 4, which would be 1. And so if you had the 0.34 and the 0.78 to get from one to the other, you would just rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1. And you would eventually, in just a few moves, get to the next point. And so we really want to make sure that we are using the formula correctly. So I'm going to show you a few examples. 5 minus 6 in that order, and then 6 minus 5 in that order for the second part. So really making sure that we understand how the formula works in terms of which numbers are subtracted. And we talked about in class, like the order doesn't really matter. Like you could do 6 minus 5 first. If you want to do this direction, 6 minus 5, that's perfectly fine. But you would have to do 5 minus 6. It would kind of change the order in both parts of the fraction. But you should get -1 either way. Make sure that anytime you get 0 in the top of a fraction, for example in number 10, we're doing -4 minus -4. Anytime those numbers are the exact same, you should be calculating a 0. Because when you subtract two numbers that are the exact same, their distance is 0 from each other. A lot of times subtraction finds the distance from two numbers. For example, 9 to 1, that's going down 8. There's an 8 in distance on the number line. But again, anytime you get 0 as a value in the numerator, as long as the second value is not 0, then your answer is 0 as a more simplified answer. So I left 11 and 12 for you to try, and let's see what you got in class. So a little harder process would be, let's say you're trying to find a missing value that works for a given slope. So we did 13 and 14 in class, where your goal is to basically complete one of the points so that when you use the values in the formula, you get exactly a specific slope, and in that case 2. And so let's look at 1 or 2 together. So 15, we're starting off with the formula y minus -4. That's what I have in the first part. And then -5 minus -3. That's got what I have for the second part. And now I'm setting that equal to what I should be calculating as an answer for slope, -9/2. So in the other problems, you didn't necessarily know the outcome, but you did know all of the things you need to put into the formula to get the answer. So we call this kind of working backwards in a sense. You're solving for what should make that all true by setting the formula up to equal your outcome. And then we start looking for things that can kind of simplify. For example, -5 minus -3, well, that's really -2. And so some people would think about cross multiplying here, but if you are trying to do this as in the shortest possible number of steps, I think I would want to take this division of -2 and multiply -2 to the other side. And when you do that, something special kind of happens with this problem. You already have a -2 here that's being divided, and here you're multiplying. So basically these are going to cancel out, and it's going to even take that negative with it. And so that 9 is left over. And if you had a calculator, it'd be way easier to see. -9 over 2. If you multiply that by -2, you're going to see that that 9 just kind of pops out there. And so let's subtract 4 to the other side to understand what y would have to be. 9 minus 4, 5. And so if you were to put 5 right here, 5 minus -4, well, that is 9. I know it's positive 9, but when you do the other part, -5 minus -3, there's your -2, giving you the correct slope answer. So let's try another one. -7 minus y divided by 1 minus -3. So I'm just really setting up the formula the way it should be calculated. But again, I don't have all the information. I don't know what y should be. But again, I know what the outcome should end up being. So I'm going to, again, look for things that can simplify. 1 minus -3, well, that's really 4. And so similar to the other problem, I am kind of interested in trying to get the y by itself, and I'm picking up on this multiplication, the division of 4 that's holding the side back. So I want to multiply 4 to the other side. And that gives me negative 7 minus y equals negative 16. So I need you to finish this one on your own. Try to move the 7 to the other side and then get that negative to the other side so that you have y by itself, and then you can check your work by plugging it in to see if it would have correctly calculated negative 4 in the slope formula. So I'm going to do one more, and we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit. I know I've been doing y2 minus y1, but I did want to take a moment to demonstrate how some people do it this way. For example, you could do y minus 5 in the top part. And that makes it a little easier. You may have been frustrated by the fact that this was harder to solve at the end because that 7 was in front or y was negative and all that. So I kind of thought, well, maybe this would be easier if I did y minus 5 instead of 5 minus y. But that means for the second part, I have to do 4 minus 0. Like the order is predetermined because of what I put the first time. If you put y minus 5, you have to do 4 minus 0. So no problem. 4 minus 0 is 4. And again, I'm wanting to solve for y. So I'm going to multiply the 4 to the other side. And basically those 4s are going to cancel out really pretty, leaving y minus 5 equals 3. And I'm sure you can think of what number minus 5 is 3. Just move that value over and you will then have y solved for. So hopefully this video was helpful, and we will see you tomorrow.